Very good. Commissioner Roth, you will be going first on this question, and since we've opened the windows on wind, we're going to stay in wind power for a moment. What can be done, or has been done, to improve the quality and quantity of wind energy in Oklahoma?
Well, as I alluded to a moment ago, last year we began, I think, that really good back and forth conversation with our major utilities. If we had said yes to their coal plant, which was larger than they needed, and as I shared with you, full of financial uncertainty, our wind opportunity would have been put off maybe indefinitely. What is happening, to answer your question, is you now have thousands of megawatts coming online. You now have wind developers literally from around this country and internationally looking at Oklahoma. I was invited to a reception that the Chamber of Commerce put together along with the Secretary of Commerce, and there were people from Monaco and Ireland and Switzerland looking at attracting capital to western Oklahoma and the Oklahoma Panhandle. That is what we need. We Oklahomans have struggled with capital for really all 101 years of our life. We need outside capital to realize our full potential, just as we did in the 20s and 30s with the oil discoveries, particularly in the eastern part of our state. It takes outside capital to get us there to build that. The second part of wind issue is the question of transmission. You know, it makes no sense to build a great, efficient car if you don't have an on-ramp to the highway to get you somewhere. We have more wind potential in this state than our state actually can have within its utilities portfolios for reliability purposes. So the question becomes, how do we build the transmission to export that wind and realize our true potential? We Oklahomans have a lot we can be proud of. As I shared with you, we're just 1% of America by population. Today we provide 4% of its domestic oil production, as much as 10% of its domestic natural gas production, and our full potential in wind is 9% of America's future wind. We will be selling our wind to the population centers back east. Connecticut, it's around 20 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity on average, and we're at 8.1 to 9 cents. That's an enormous marginal difference that those out of state and even out of country capital dollars are looking at coming for the sake of developing. And that means royalty-based leasing on windmills for farmers and ranchers out west that have struggled with capital for decades and have lost their kids as a generation to the urban parts of Oklahoma or even beyond. This is a win-win for us in so many regards, but it does take leadership, and it does take standing toe-to-toe occasionally with the utilities and saying, this is the direction for our state, come and go with us, or you're not going to enjoy a very good rate of return. You have to get their attention because Oklahoma's promise is yet to be realized, but it's coming soon.
Wind power is definitely important, but just as everything else you're seeing, the rising cost of everything and putting infrastructure in. The point of the Red Rock Power case, an administrative law judge who actually heard the case determined it would have saved $5.5 billion over 40 years for Oklahoma consumers and paid back in 4.18 years. We already have coal-fired power plants. We need to make sure that we're using those in the best way possible. We also need to make sure that we're using natural gas. We must continue to move forward on the wind energy aspects. That is an incredible capital outlay, and there are challenges that go with that as well. There are only certain areas that are the best areas to put the wind turbines up. You're going to have challenges among landowners who have a turbine on their land and are going to get royalty from it versus an adjoining landowner who's just going to have the transmission line and they're not going to be able to get the royalty from that. There are challenges that are going to be faced. The wind farm that's out west of Fort Supply, we actually did some filming out there, and we already know many of those blades have already cracked just in the amount of time that they have been there. They've had to go up, take them down, get some reformulation on the blades, and bring them back. Because it's a definite challenge in transporting these blades and all of the parts that go with these big wind turbines. So there's issues that we have to look to, and just thinking, it's all great, and it's the one answer that we need. There is no one perfect fuel. They all have issues. We must use what we have. We must use the wind that we have and continue to develop that. We must use natural gas. We must start looking towards solar. And if we're going to go to the trouble of building the transmission lines out in western Oklahoma, Maybe we need to start thinking about if we had a nuclear plant or something else that actually could tie right in to the transmission, because that's going to be one of the most expensive issues in getting this wind power to where it needs to go. Because in some respects, it's similar to the oil and gas industry. You can't go out and drill a great well and not have a pipeline to transport it somewhere to market. So you must have transmission and the infrastructure, and it's all being built. Do you think this is just going to happen overnight? It sounds like we're just going to have wind power tomorrow in abundance, doesn't it? It's going to take a lot of time to build this and move forward. I am definitely in favor of wind power. I'm from northwestern Oklahoma, so I know how much the wind blows. It's an important resource to tap, but just as important, our natural gas resources and some of the other sources that we have. Those are really important too.
Well, I'm a bit surprised at the passion associated with the case that you didn't participate in. I was there. I asked the questions. That Red Rock power plant was a mistake for Oklahoma. The utilities admitted it, or they would have gone forward after we said no on ratepayers funding it. If they thought it was such a great deal, they would have still gone forward, and they didn't. The financial numbers that you heard, I think, was just an idea that maybe Wyoming deserved $5 billion of your money. That is a mistake. The construction costs associated with that plant, from someone who was there, I will tell you, was estimated at $1.8 billion. Would have been the largest construction project in state history. But yet it was a 2-year-old estimate, and they weren't willing to adjust it up. As a county commissioner, my first year in office, I knew what a mile cost to pave. With the cost associated with concrete, steel, and petroleum, it doubled by my 5th year in office, and those were publicly bid contracts. It was ridiculous for the utility to try to suggest it was still only going to be $2 billion. I hope I'm not hearing that Wyoming comes first. Oklahoma comes first. Secondly, when this state flirted with the idea of deregulation just 10 years ago, several independent power producers came in and built new power plants. Maybe you've heard of Redbud in Luther, Oklahoma, and Calpine near Tulsa. After Enron held California hostage, the rest of the country freaked out, and no one went forward with deregulation. And those power plants were sitting idle because they couldn't access the transmission monopolized by the utilities. Many of them went through bankruptcy. My comments on the record last year in my 4-page opinion, and I would encourage any of you to check it out if you're curious, based on the record, based on someone who was there and challenged the witnesses in the testimony, is that we don't need to ask Oklahoma to buy a large, inefficient Suburban, bigger than we need for the size of our family, when you can go buy a nice used cream puff car in the Oklahoma driveway today. The utilities took my advice. They did it. They now bought a 1,200 megawatt natural gas-fired plant for $852 million instead of a 950 megawatt coal plant with Wyoming's fuel for $2+ billion. The case was decided right. I'm proud of Commissioner Cloud for joining me, and I'm proud that we now will realize Oklahoma's wind potential, and I hope many of you that are graduating appreciate that we actually did something to encourage the economy here at home so you will stay and be Oklahomans for life.
All right. Commissioner, you were a little long there. Judge Murphy, I can give you a little latitude in your last rebuttal.
Thank you. The issue isn't just about Oklahoma first. It's about America first. And we need to use the power sources and the fuel sources that we actually have. If you go in and look, this Redbud plant that's been referred to, it's had some pre-approval features too. And the standard way that utility cases have been looked at is once they become used and useful, then there's a rate adjustment or rate increase that's requested, and that's what the commissioners deliberate. We need to be looking at things a little differently. Maybe there are some places for some short-term construction where pre-approval makes sense, where the utilities don't have to go out and get the loans with interest, and instead of one big increase, maybe we can have something that's more adjustable at the front. The issue is we need to be looking at things in a different way, not just the standard way that review has been done of utility cases. We have coal-fired power plants, and they provide a lot of jobs to people, and the Red Rock power plant would have been built in an area that's starved for economic development. It would have been making some adjustments and changes and constructing onto one that already exists. And if you look at this Redbud plant, it's not necessarily a situation where it's going to create all these new jobs. It's already in existence. It's already been running. The challenge again that we face, there is no one answer. We don't need to be looking just 5 and 10 years and 20 years. We need to be looking as far ahead as we can, laying out the infrastructure that's actually needed in Oklahoma on the transmission side and in all of these other areas. Again, wind is important, natural gas is important, but just like the oil and gas industry has evolved, so will the coal industry. And I still believe, in looking forward, we must take a look at nuclear. I still think it's important to look at all those fuels again, including solar as well.